Hi, BioHive. This is your host, Jenna Barbari. Welcome to the HiveCast. And joining us today is Tina Marriott, the founder of Lindrow, former COO and president of Recursion, and an amazing former coworker of mine. It's wonderful to have you, Tina. Thank you for coming on HiveCast.
It's so great to be here, Jenna. Thank you for having me.
Yes, we're so excited. There's so much that we get to talk about now as you are moving on to a new phase of your career. We're going to reflect back into some of your earlier days, starting off as an intern at Genentech and rising up through the ranks, becoming Recursion's COO and president, and now consulting and building your own business. So excited to dig into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do it. So take us back to the beginning of your career. You started as an intern at Genentech, coming right out of school. And I always love to hear how people got their start. And I think it can be really interesting, where you thought you would end up going in your career might not be where you landed. And I think that was the case for you. So you were an engineer originally and for many, many years of your career. How did you land that first internship and what were you working on?
Yeah, so I still consider myself an engineer at heart, although I haven't done a lot of hands-on engineering for a lot of years. But I graduated from Colorado State University, which is not one of the big name universities in the life science field. And I had a degree in chemical engineering, but I knew I wanted to work in the biotech industry. And I was really fortunate as an undergraduate that I went and talked to professors about getting work study dollars to actually work in the labs. And so by the time I applied for an internship at Genentech, I had already had a lot of experience working with growing cells in the labs. In that case, I worked with a professor that we were growing plant cells. And so even before I got the internship, in many ways, the internship is the experience or opportunity that set up my entire career. That was 30 years ago, May this year. So 30 years ago, I had an internship that really changed the trajectory of my career and my life. And it even started a few years before that in college when I did undergraduate research. That's always something when young people are going into sciences. I always say you can never get started too early just getting some hands-on experience doing some kind of science, and that sets up for an internship. And then I was an intern at Genentech in 1996, and I always say I got to join the 20th anniversary party of Genentech in 1996. And then my last party at Genentech was the 40th anniversary party in 2016. So that one internship set up a 20-year career.
Yeah, that is a long time to be at one company, especially in this day and age where we see a lot more, turnover and people chasing new opportunities every couple of years. So you were a part of Genentech really through an incredible growth phase of the company, and you wore many different hats over the course of your time there. So tell me about you obviously were an intern, you grew into an engineer and then a team lead. And so what was it like at that time, like helping Genentech scale on the engineering side with a team of engineers below you?
Yeah, when I first started at Genentech, engineering had just been created as a job family. It was very much a science company, and they were getting ready to become the platform company that scaled the antibodies for treating cancer. But that hadn't happened yet. None of those drugs had been launched when I started Genentech. And the company was really, even after 20 years, starting to realize how important engineers and engineering was as a capability to scale for a company that had been such a pure science company in so many ways. And so all of the engineers of the company, when I joined, we fit in one conference room. It was in Building 5. I remember it very well. And we'd get together, these meetings, and talk about engineering. And so partly that early part of my career was being a young engineer going into a company where there were other engineers. The company had an incredible track record for science, but there was so much still to be figured out and so much opportunity for me as a young engineer to both be surrounded by great people I could learn from, but to really carve my own path as an engineer and figure things out along the way. And Genentech itself had an incredible mission, creating drugs that really improved lives and changed lives. The people and the focus on people as the tagline from one of the founders was our greatest assets, walk home in tennis shoes every night. And so there was a real people focus and stellar next generation science, right? And so I think all of those elements came together, and I got to be at that company. And for the first about 15 years of my career, I was really stayed close to the engineering. In fact, I bent over backwards to keep myself close to the engineering, even turning down promotions into management early on in my career so I could learn more and more technical skills. And Some of those decisions were a little hard at the time. It wasn't always clear that was the right decision at the time. But now looking back, I'm so grateful I had that phase of my career to learn so much of that foundational technology at a company that was building the biotech industry.
Yes, that's something that we said a lot at Recursion. I think a lot of companies here in Utah, in more of the startup mode, use that phrase of building the plane while you're flying it. And I think that is really amazing experience to have created something that was so new and didn't really exist yet. And I'm sure that's something that you've carried forward now into the rest of your career. And I'm curious about, as you know, you developed, and you mentioned learning being a really important part of your experience as an engineer. And I think you've always said you're a lifelong learner, as many of us in the life sciences are and have to be. So you have a unique career story in which you don't have your MBA, you don't have your PhD. I think you were really intentional about that decision. There's a lot of pressure in the industry to take that path, and you've really carved your own path. And so I'm curious to hear, how you've really been able to invest in your own learning, and what your thought process was as you weighed, I'm sure on many occasions, whether or not you would go back to school or if you would kind of continue on the experience path.
Yeah, absolutely. And it probably looks a little more intentional in the rearview mirror than it did when I was living my life as a young engineer. But I definitely remember very clearly one of my early days at Genentech. Somebody who'd been at the company for many years and was really great to me. He was a mentor to me, and he said, "You will never get promoted past research associate at this company without a PhD." And it was, in his world, that was a very true perspective. And he wasn't saying it to be discouraging, quite the opposite. It was a great career advice from his perspective, and obviously advice that I remember all these years later. I took it to heart, but I didn't follow that path. And I think that is kind of one of many examples in my life where I always love to learn from others. I love incorporating other perspectives. I will take advice anywhere I can get it. And also, at the end of the day, I decide what's right for me and have that, I think, that comfort in being uncomfortable by taking the path less traveled, if you will. And so I think there's a lot of places in my life where I have done that. One of them is working at a premier company. Almost everybody there does have a PhD or an MD or a PhD and an MD. And usually they're from places like Stanford and MIT and Johns Hopkins. And being a bachelor degree engineer from Colorado State University, that my credentials were not what was going to make, build success for me in my career. And I knew that from the beginning. And in a way, that just drove me more to make sure that I learned as much as I could, worked really hard, became as valuable as I could to the mission, learning the technology we were building, to the people around me. And those were the things that I built my career on. I'm not against getting a PhD or an MD. I learned so much being surrounded by people that have had those degrees. So in no way do I suggest I'm against those things. For me, I was able to build in a different way and still have an amazing career in environments that are dominated by people that were more degreed than me.
Yes. I think you said a couple of things there that were really interesting to me. It's one, being curious and always continuing to learn and putting yourself in a position where you're, curious and you're chasing those opportunities to learn. It's two, working hard. It's hard work to build something that's never been done before.
There's kind of no substitute for that.
There's no substitute for that hard work, and I've seen that.
Important.
Absolutely. And then I would believe relationships also were an important part of your growth and your experience. And I would love to hear a little bit about any of the mentors or the team members that you had in those, early days of your career that you think maybe set you on a path for becoming a leader. I'd be curious to hear when you had the thought, like, maybe it is time for me to step out of engineering. Maybe I am ready for more of a business strategy role. Who kind of brought you along on that journey, and what did that look like as you made that transition?
Yeah, well, I have been fortunate to have amazing mentors over the years. And so I was actually just thinking, how many of them can I talk about? But I won't be able to get through all of them. But one that comes to mind is Jerry Keisha. He was my boss for years at Genentech. And he pushed me very hard
As a good boss
As a good
does.
boss does, and he supported me very hard, as a good boss does. He was also funny, which it kind of made it all a little bit easier.
Enjoying working together goes a long way.
And he was, and I remember at one point, he said something to me. He's like, well, when you're a vice president, this is going to be important. And I can't remember the specific thing. I'm sure it was something that was probably a budget or something I didn't really want to do because I was like, wanted to be an engineer and didn't want to worry about management things at the time. But I remember that, like, when you're a vice president, and the way he said it was just like a fact. And at the time I thought, that's the most insane thing I've ever heard. I'm never going to be a vice president. Like, I'm an engineer. But once again, I remembered all these years later, and I think he saw potential and a future for me that I had not yet been able to see for myself. Not even that I didn't think I was capable. It was more that I just didn't even think that would be a thing that I would want. But then, of course, over time and with growth, my balance of engineering to people and business became more and more people and business focused over the years. And I really learned to enjoy that as much as I had enjoyed the engineering. But in that moment, I couldn't see that. But he saw that for me. And I think that is so important to help, not to give false compliments or false hope, right?
You would
but
never. You would never.
I don't do that. Yeah,
No.
No. I'm
All business.
I give hard feedback. But to really help people see in the moment how much more they can be maybe than they are today, and to kindly push and support to get them there. And I've had a lot of mentors. Jerry Keisha was one. Another one, actually, a local Utah connection here. Dane Anderson hired me as an intern at Genentech, and he had to do so without an on-site interview because back then they wouldn't fly an intern out to California to interview. And he now is...
So like a phone call interview?
There's
then?
like a phone call interview.
No
Back
Zoom
then,
at that time, probably?
No Zoom, no smartphones. Yeah, no video at all. Just talk to me on the phone based on my resume. Hired me, and we worked together for years at Genentech. He was my boss many times, and now he leads technology and manufacturing at Denali, who just built a plant here in Utah. So I get to see him here in Utah, actually, still all these 30 years later. So.
It is such a small world in this industry. Regardless, we all know Salt Lake is small lake city, and we all bump into each other here. But it really is a tight-knit community of people that you've really gotten to know well over the course of your career. So great stories. I would love to, before we move away from kind of the beginning days and Genentech, you mentioned you bookended your career there with a 20-year holiday party, a 40-year holiday party. Recursion has phenomenal holiday parties in my experience. I'm sure you had a hand in that. And so I am so curious what a Genentech holiday party looked like, maybe at 20 years versus at 40 years. I'm sure the team is a lot bigger at 40 than 20. For the people that maybe are planning their holiday party and thinking about incentivizing their team, what did you learn from those experiences? Yeah,
well, Genentech had this work hard, play hard was kind of the tagline. And so Genentech played hard for sure. And I was not the party planner, just to be clear, but I loved these events. And they were not just team building and rewarding folks that worked really hard there, but they were cultural icons. And so one event, there were regular Friday afternoon get-togethers called ho-hos, and some of them were really fun. So my department organized one called the Bikes and Blues Ho-Ho, where people would come up with bikes, like motorcycles, and show them off. I actually always ran the tattoo contest every year, so I got to see a lot of tattooed skin of my coworkers.
That is really fun.
Take a Polaroid of it and put it up and kind of make up a contest. And people get pretty passionate about their body art. So those kind of things just spoke to the fact, rewarding people, but also, bring your full self to work, right? Mm-hmm. This is a company of serious scientists. We're there to change people's lives, but also just recognizing we were all humans and part of this human community. And you mentioned the holiday parties. They, over the years, had to be in increasingly big venues, but they were in San Francisco. They were fantastic. The Exploratorium, which is a science museum in San Francisco, was host for several years. Several downtown hotels would take up multiple floors, and it was so fun to be in the middle of San Francisco. And in the final years, it was in the stadium where the Giants play. Cool. And they switched it. They originally, Christmas or holiday time, winter holiday parties was a little bit cold to be in an evening gown on the field. And then they switched them to summer events and did Genentech Gives Back Week. So it was a whole week of charity. Genentech was threw fantastic concerts. I saw everybody there from Bob Dylan to Foo Fighters, Elton John in the parking lot across from where I work.
That is special.
Justin Timberlake, Peak, you name it. They had a lot of great performers come, and it was, once again, speaking, it's a reward. We worked really hard there. So it was a way to reward the hard work, bring families in, reward the people that supported us as we were working really hard. But then also, once again, speaking to a broad cultural inclusivity of the company and us as like full humans.
Yes. When you have a tough health insurance question, the last thing you need is a 40-minute hold and someone who's never heard of Utah. University of Utah Health Plan's health insurance is different. We're your neighbor. We know the local doctors and over 20,000 providers statewide, from Logan to St. George. And when you need world-class care, University of Utah Health is right here. Local health insurance expertise, real people, real help. University of Utah Health Plans. Find your health insurance plan at uofuhealthplan.utah.edu. So you said earlier, what's the quote? Your best assets go home in their sneakers.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. I really love that. I'm going to think about that for a long time, I think.
Yeah, very famous quote from one of Genentech's co-founders, and defined a lot of the culture for a lot of years.
Wow, that's a good one. That's new to me, so I'll hang on to that, absolutely. And then you left Genentech in, 2018?
I did.
Yes.
No, I left Genentech in 2016 to go to Achaogen, and then came to Recursion in 2018.
Yes, that was the timeline. So then you were convinced by Chris Gibson to move to Salt Lake. You'd been in the Bay for 20 or so years at that point. And I know it took a little bit of convincing for you to come out here. Tell us that story. Tell us kind of how Chris approached you and what your thoughts were hearing from him when Recursion was, in its earliest, just maybe 4 years in. What did that feel like, and how did Chris make you see the vision for what he was looking to create here in Utah?
Yeah, I do think this is a masterclass in executive recruiting for anybody out there trying to recruit executives. And first of all, reached out through a very sophisticated recruiting agency, Occam, based out of New York. Mm-hmm. And the recruiter never discussed location, just really had a very compelling description of both the mission of Recursion, the technology Recursion was using to do AI-driven drug discovery, which wasn't even something anybody was really thinking about.
It wasn't a word or a term yet.
At that time, right? And Chris as a founder CEO, right? And so it was a very compelling vision. And I remember thinking, but no location was discussed.
Yeah, they did tell you the company, though.
Yeah, the company name, right? Yeah. And so I think, but that kind of first hook email, if you will. And I remember in that first moment thinking, this is exactly the type of company I hoped somebody would build. Mm-hmm. And so I was very excited about it. And then I remember thinking, I hope it's not in Boston. Because at the time, in my worldview, the only place this kind of company would ever be built was San Francisco or Boston. I just didn't have a broader aperture at the time. And I was right. It wasn't Boston, but it turns out it was in Salt Lake City.
Were you hoping it was San Fran?
I was hoping it was San Fran. I'd been there for 22 years. I was settled there. And I really couldn't imagine moving out of there, family. And so when I saw it was Utah, then it was like, oh, shoot, right? That's disappointing. But I was so excited. I talked to the recruiter and I said, look, this company is so compelling. Maybe I could be an advisor. Maybe I could, could I help, even though there's no way I can move to Utah.
Lo and behold.
But could I help, right? And so that's how it started. And massive credit to Chris for meeting with me despite the fact that, there was no way I was going to move. Chris is a brilliant storyteller, brilliant at pitching and describing his vision, which not only was just a vision, but it was something I really, really believed was going to change our industry. And then kind of slowly working me into the idea of, maybe I could relocate myself and my family to the state of Utah. And it took several months, and he did things like called me up and said, "Oh, hey, I'm in San Francisco. Can you grab a cup of coffee and we'll just chat?" And he'd actually just flown out there just to talk to me. But we did, and I remember that chat very, very clearly. It was raining. We were at a little coffee shop. I was really worried one of my coworkers was going to see me because I still had a job.
It was a recent job, too. I'm sure at that time you were not really in the job market because you just started a new gig at that point and weren't expecting anything like this to come out of the blue.
Yeah, I was absolutely not looking. And beyond it being relatively recent, we were getting ready to launch our first drug. And so I was really, really busy and focused on that that drug launch. And in the end, actually, Chris worked with me to allow me to work for both Recursion and continue working for Occasion for a period of time to make sure that
you get to
I can meet
see
that drug launch through.
It's a great experience to bring back to Recursion as well.
Oh, yeah,
I'm sure he was like, this is worthwhile. So
yeah, absolutely. And, I think he wanted to hire somebody who was dedicated to the mission and getting things over the line and wouldn't just jump because an opportunity came up. So over many months and conversations, I finally became convinced about what a great place Salt Lake City would be to move to, not just for me, but for my family.
Mm-hmm. And what did you see? Tell me kind of what the elements that, as you sat with it and you really thought about what this could look like, you were excited about some pieces. So what were the pieces that really compelled you to make the choice?
Yeah, a lot of it was spending time, particularly with my daughter, which is a hard thing as a working mom, particularly an executive. Mm-hmm. And there's never enough time. And one thing, we're an outdoor family, skiing, hiking, mountain biking, and certainly living in San Francisco. We managed, my daughter was on like an all-mountain ski team, despite the fact that it was a very long drive every other weekend to get her there. And so moving here to Salt Lake, the access to the outdoors here is just unparalleled. I grew up in Colorado. I thought Colorado had great outdoors. It does, but it's all right here. Like I can live in Salt Lake and in 25 minutes I can be on a ski lift, I can be on a mountain bike trail, in less than that hiking from my front door. And the lifestyle is very family friendly, more affordable than the Bay Area. I love the Bay Area. I love California. But it just gave me more time to continue to grow my career, be focused on building Recursion with Chris and the team, and also really have kind of that ease of lifestyle and ease of access to the outdoors.
Shorter commute. I could spend that with probably a way shorter commute.
Much shorter commute. And, now my daughter's 18. She was 10 at the time we moved. She wasn't fully bought in, like moving's hard at that age in the beginning. And now she looks back and she says how grateful she is to be able to grow up in Utah because just the size of Salt Lake City. She went to a great school that she loved and really got a lot of outdoor time. So it worked out in the end. But at the time, not only was it hard to leave the place I'd lived more than 20 years and my friends, California's pretty nice, but that was really the center of the biotechnology industry. And so going from building at the center of the industry to a place that really people in my circles would not associate with building a biotechnology company. That felt pretty risky as well.
Yes, absolutely. And Salt Lake looked very different, I would believe, in 2018, 2019 than even today. I can't believe it's been almost a decade that you've been here. So what are your thoughts? I know Chris obviously had this vision for what Utah could become, and it really has become that life science and healthcare hub that we all kind of saw on the horizon. I think it's here now today. But what's your take on kind of the growth and what Salt Lake looks like now today as a hub for this industry compared to when you first got here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one I want to say is Salt Lake is not trying to be San Francisco or Boston. San Francisco and Boston are still heavyweights when it comes to drug development and biotech, and in San Francisco, of course, tech as well with Silicon Valley. Salt Lake offers something different, and that's what I think is most important to understand. One thing is Salt Lake is a place where the founder community, the community of companies is so closely connected to each other, connected to the universities, connected to the government. Mm-hmm. And so that sense of community and being able to build within a community. So one thing that's really exciting I see about Salt Lake is there's so many small startups, great ideas, entrepreneurs that are really going for it and doing it, in this community that's very supportive of what's being built here. The other thing that's really interesting about Utah that maybe was always there, but I see it really coming to fruition now is because it's not one of the big established hubs, there is more opportunity to be a little bit more experimental, to try new things. One example I was just reading on the way over here is that Utah just became the first state to do a pilot for AI pharmacists, right, for chronic illnesses, to allow an AI to provide those prescriptions versus a medical doctor. Now, that might be a great idea or it might be a terrible idea. I don't know.
But we're going to find out here in Utah.
But we're going to find out here in Utah. And that, to me, is one of many examples. If you think about the healthcare system we have here, we've got two, between University of Utah and Intermountain Healthcare, we have two large hospital systems here that are, really want to push forward research and have clinical practices that can do that, nationally recognized. So you kind of combine those actual real hospital systems that really are interested in innovation and medical research with this very supportive culture of entrepreneurship and a founder community. It's a really unique place to build companies. And I'm glad we're not trying to be San Francisco or Boston or someplace else. Like we should try to be Salt Lake. We're the BioHive, and that's what we are trying to be. And I think that's wonderful. As somebody who now spends a lot of my time working in both places, what's most important is to be who you are, right? And that's what I'm seeing in Salt Lake. And when I first got here a decade ago, I think there was maybe a little more vision than substance, particularly on the drug side. A long-term industry in medical devices, which has been here and has provided a lot of foundation to build more drug and other life science research on top of, but seeing a lot more traction on the pharmaceutical side as well in the last decade.
Yeah, there's so much going on here, just from not only a company standpoint, but to your point, really the connection between government and resources and university and hospital systems. There really is like a cool, close-knit community here where if you're looking for help, if you're looking for guidance, if you're looking for a partner, you're probably one person away from the person that you're looking to talk to. It's really easy to make those connections and make things happen here in a way that I feel like is really special and unique. So. Utah is a global leader in healthcare innovation. From internationally recognized cancer research to diagnostics reaching patients in the most remote corners of the world, the future of health is being built right here in Utah. On October 8th, 2026, BioHive Premieres brings our state's leadership to center stage at the Salt Lake City Megaplex. Across multiple theaters, each showcase highlights a different frontier of health and the innovators driving it forward. Join industry leaders, researchers, entrepreneurs, clinicians, students, and our BioHive community to uncover the breakthroughs shaping the future of health. Register today at biohive.com/BioHive Premieres.
Yeah. I don't think I ever met one politician in California, and I've met all sorts of them here, right? And they call me on my cell phone, and because they're really, particularly in an era where politicians can seem very far removed from the citizens they serve, being in a community where people are really actually focused on building this life science industry together and asking what does it take to do that, that is really special about Utah. And I've never experienced that before moving here.
Yeah, we all also get to see, there's something in it for me too. Like we're all a patient at the end of the day. And I think that we really prioritize this industry and are starting to recognize that this is a huge strength for our state. And we want it to be a huge strength for our state. It's in all of our best interest. So Coming back to when you started at Recursion, I'm curious, what were some of the first couple of things that you started working on when you started? What was going on at the company, and how did you really jump in from the beginning?
Well, it was definitely drinking from a fire hose, as all startups should be. One of the first things is we needed a headquarters, and so the project had started before I got here in turning a mall in downtown Salt Lake City, a sporting goods store, into Recursion's headquarters, which is its headquarters to this day. So I learned a lot more about construction than I had known previously. Also, really starting to thinking about building an executive team alongside Chris. For a lot of that early year, the executive team was myself, Chris, and Mason, our chief technology officer. And obviously over the years needed to really help Chris build up the executive team. And we have a fantastic executive team at the company today. And, I needed to learn the company, and there's so much going on in those early days, trying to learn the technology. I was obviously more comfortable on the drug side. I was one of the more experienced drug developers or pharmaceutical industry folks at the time. But I really needed to learn a lot about things like machine learning and GPUs and a lot of this technology that had not been part of the industry I came from. And then learning how to build a company in Utah versus what I'd known in terms of building in San Francisco, including things. And one of the things I remember is Chris asking me to host a weekly all hands. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty common, I think, for tech companies and startups, less common, where I'd come from. And as somebody, I'm an engineer, I'm an introvert. I'm a social introvert, so I'm happy to chit-chat, like with you, Jenna. This is awesome. But I'm not somebody who loves just ad hoc getting up in front of large groups. And so even just the thought of that at the time being like, oh, this is going to be part of my job, and was for many, many years, to get up in front of the company. And particularly, obviously, it was most important for Chris to be in front of the company, but particularly for my first about year at the company, he was out raising the Series C, which was a hard raise, and it is for almost any company. That's when you start to almost get into the real money, become a real company, you start getting line of sight to IPO and things like that. And so he was probably on the road 80% of the time. So if you kind of think that of coming into this company, very different. Also, coming into a new geography, getting to know Chris, trying to understand his vision, making sure I knew what he wanted. And then, he's on the road most of the time. And so in many ways, I was the one that was kind of back home at the company and thinking about how we're going to hire all these people, onboard all these people, focus, prioritize, spend all that money he was out there working so hard to get us. So.
Yeah, I know this started a little bit before I joined Recursion in 2021, but I do remember there was kind of a moment where Chris had shifted from more of the operations focus to being like the face of the company in a new way. I think it was really on the heels of the IPO after I started, where he kind of had to hand over the reins to you and leading the company and holding down the fort at home while he was out raising money. And you carried the team through some huge moments, multiple acquisitions, office build outs in other countries as well. I'm sure that was a new learning curve for you. So as you reflect back on some of the big moments over the course of your time at Recursion, like what stands out as, some of those milestones, some of those moments that were maybe really hard but really gratifying, or those things that you're really grateful now as you're moving into this next phase of your career and becoming more of an advisor and mentor. What do you reflect on as being really pivotal from your time at Recursion?
So many pivotal moments.
It was a busy couple of years.
Yeah, but I think there are more. So Recursion was a company that needed to grow. And every company takes a different approach, but Recursion was taking a really big swing at completely disrupting an industry using computational technology and life science. And so a company like Recursion could not afford incremental or, worst case, static growth. And so that I knew that coming in, and Chris knew that, which is one reason he spent so much time out there, raising money to ensure that we could fuel this vision that he had. And so I think a lot about the growth and the amount of recruiting I did here in Salt Lake, putting the headquarters, talking to executives, flying out to places like San Francisco and getting, finding those people like me who, could be convinced to move here to Salt Lake City, but then also realizing to fuel the ambitions of the company, we're going to have to grow via acquisition as well. And that's a pretty tough decision for a company, right? When I first started Recursion, we all worked in the same room. Like every coworker from the company I could see from my desk. It was fantastic.
Crazy.
It was fantastic, right? And there's so many wonderful things about being able to build, but in order to really scale and grow, that wasn't going to be the future trajectory of Recursion. And you can see now, after all these years, Recursion's merged with several companies. And I think about that first acquisition, and I actually remember Chris coming to me and saying, "Okay, I want you to go buy this company." And I was kind of like, He was serious. That company was Viam, our first acquisition, and for me, I'd never acquired a company before. This was a totally new concept to me. We didn't have a fully built out executive team yet, so functions that reported in through me at the time were things like HR, legal, finance, IT, right?
Like wearing every hat every hour, just switching them out.
We called it chief pinch hitter officer was generally how my role was described at the time. And but we figured it out, and we figured it out together, right? We had experts in all of those areas of the company, even if they weren't at the executive team. We relied on experts outside the company. We learned on our own. We did some things well. We made some mistakes. We did it better the next time. Every acquisition we had after that, we got better and better. And that to me is the kind of the story of everything we did at Recursion, whether it was bringing in talent, growing the technology, my core role, not the chief pinch hitter officer role, but the role that people that reported to me consistently were the folks running our platform and the technology platform. And that went through many, many, many iterations over the years. The company was started in 2013 on a very different basis. And so constantly thinking about how to improve, rejigger that platform to keep up with the technology, to build the data set that we were building. Oh my gosh, there's a million stories,
I know.
Jenna.
There's
I can't.
like a
We
million.
haven't even talked
That's
about
a lot of great
raising a
stories.
Series C, a Series D, partnering with Bear, partnering with Roche Genentech, and taking the company public.
Yeah, and that was all in like a 2.5 year period of time
and,
or so.
A pandemic, as you
Yeah,
mentioned. You
global
started
pandemic.
in 2021, right?
Yeah, I started remote and
were
working from home, and I think it was still about a year before we were back in the office. There were moments, and there were some different phases where we could sign on, I'm coming in on Tuesday. There are only so many spots. But so you and Chris have a really interesting two-way mentor relationship. Chris graduated with his PhD while you had years and years and years of real-world business experience coming from Genentech. He had this vision. You really had the experience that Chris didn't. And so I think that created a really interesting dynamic between the two of you. If you could share just a little bit about what that working relationship was like with him at the time.
Absolutely. And Chris, he had his PhD, and he was also almost finished medical school here at University of Utah.
Almost, basically honorary.
Exactly. And so he left medical school to found this company, and that, which speaks to the courage of an entrepreneur. Yeah. I don't think I ever could have done that, which is an example of, the type of thing I learned from Chris, that entrepreneurial courage. But it was a really interesting relationship. I think I'd been in the industry, for about 17 years at that point, and this, in many ways, was Chris's first job.
Yeah.
And so, there's one casting where you could say I was brought in to mentor Chris, to learn from me about management, building companies, and certainly that was what happened. And I learned just as much from him about vision, about courage, about emerging technology. A lot of my technical experience was built, almost 2 decades earlier, and things are moving so fast in our industry. And about telling stories in a way at the intersection of telling a life science story in the way tech companies tell tech stories, which is a skill set, as you know.
Yes, absolutely.
And a skill set that a lot of founders, CEOs building in tech bio right now are really trying to develop. And Chris is brilliant at that, which is a skill set beyond just the storytelling and raising the money, really getting both experts and people that are really smart and interested in solving problems in medicine, but maybe aren't experts in medicine, bringing everybody along in seeing this vision to build. And so I learned a lot from him. And I'd like to think he learned a lot from me. You'll have to ask him, but certainly he got a ton of feedback from me. And we got we got to the place where we could debate pretty robustly, and I think always get to a better outcome than if one or the other of us would have had full decision-making power in all cases.
Yeah, that's what you dream of on a team, is to be able to have those really healthy debates, even if they do sometimes get a little heated. I think creating an environment like that where you get to be your full self and you get to share, really what's in your head and what you're thinking to get to the best outcome possible for the team. So great reflection. What a fun time of our lives that we get to share together today a little bit. Let's move into kind of this next chapter for you. You have taken a little bit of a break, recalibrated in your life, and thought about what this next phase post-recursion should look like. And you are now, I laugh when you said, Chris took this risk to build something of his own. You would have never done that. And yet here you are, launching your own company just this past year.
I learned a lot from him. So
Tina, tell us about Lindrow, your consulting you say firm or business that you've started, and this role now that you're taking on as an advisor in this next chapter of your career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I picked up this great phrase, and I actually tried to look up who it's attributed to, and there's multiple attributions. So I don't know who originally came up with this, but it's this concept that in life and in careers, you have these phases that roughly follow this trajectory of learn, earn, and return. And I heard that from a colleague at Recursion, and I can't remember who. I feel terrible, but it's like really stuck with me, this concept of learn, earn, and return. And so for me, the opportunity to transition from Recursion, take a minute to catch my breath. That's a hard job.
Yeah, worked hard, hard work,
hard
absolutely.
work. And now, I'm 30 years I've been in this industry. It's been a lot of hard work. Had a minute to take a breath, and now really feel like I'm transitioning in to that return portion of my career. And hopefully I've got another decade, maybe 2 decades ahead of me. I'm in my early 50s, so I've got a lot of energy. So hopefully I've got a lot of runway ahead of me. And I really had a chance to be thoughtful of what do I want to do with this return phase of my career? And the only job I get recruited for these days is startup CEO, which is maybe that'll be part of this phase of my career. Never say never. But that was the most obvious opportunity before me. But the opportunity I decided to take was to found Lindrow. And the reason I took that is, for me, this concept of I've learned so much in 30 years. I've been able to work at companies that weren't just part of an industry, but were building and leading the industry they were in. I've worked with great people, great technology, incredible missions. And I could take that experience and give it to one company to build one thing, or could I find a way to give it back to the industry?
Sprinkle it around.
Sprinkle it around. I love that. And so that's what Lindrow is about for me, is how can I help life science companies, technology companies solving really important mission-driven problems? And particularly, how can I help founders, entrepreneurs, investors trying to build these companies build great companies? Great companies create great products. Great companies are great places for people to work. I've been able to be involved in that for decades of my career. I grew up in a Hewlett-Packard family, and so I think these seeds were planted. My dad's an engineer in a great company of its era. How can I spend this next decade plus of my career helping the industry grow those companies? So that's what Lindrow is about, and it's also fun because I get to try a few different things. And Lindrow today has 3 different arms I'm working on. One is the advising arm, and that looks like advising, so far, founder CEOs. I think it could also be executives, boards, investors. But really, I think the giving founder CEOs a co-pilot, if you will, as they're learning their lessons and building companies. But that's a little bit limited, right? So you think about, I've thought a lot about how do I scale that, right? That's a very tech concept. And Lindrow Stories is the way that I'm thinking about trying to scale, creating not just a storytelling platform, but ultimately a storytelling community where people building these companies really can share stories, understand, learn from each other, and figure out a way to do it across company lines, which is pretty hard in an industry that is competitive and confidential information is important. And so that's a really fun problem to try to solve. And the third arm of Lindrow is doing events in person. So it's Lindrow Advising, Lindrow Stories, Lindrow Events. We live in a beautiful place here in Utah, as you well know. And I've had the opportunity to do a lot of offsites over my career in a lot of beautiful places. And I really dream about bringing executive teams, boards, teams of entrepreneurs here to Utah and doing that storytelling, building that community in person. For how much I love virtual platforms and their ability to scale, I still believe there's no substitute for those in-person connections. So trying to see if I can bring all of those things to bear on the industry over the next decade.
That is amazing. I didn't know about the Lindrow Stories, actually. That's new information to me today. So that is an interesting challenge because it is competitive and it is hard when you're trying to protect, some of your own information, but you also need help and you need outside opinion. So keep me updated on on that journey. It's really important. I know you are not able to share specifics of the companies that you're working with and advising at Lindrow, but I would be curious kind of what it is that you look for in the companies or the founders or the executives that you want to be working with in this phase. Is it like a certain growth phase for that company? Is it, a life moment for that founder? Like, is it really about the mission and what problem they're looking to solve? Like, what is it that really entices you about a company and then brings you along to make you feel like it's going to be a great fit, not only for you, but for both of you?
I mean, I'd say yes to all of those. And as a data person, I think about it as a multi-parameter optimization problem. And the three parameters I'm trying to optimize for in finding companies to work with, founders to work with is mission, technology, and people. And if you have a great mission and have shown this ability to bring great people to bear on that mission, and your science and technology is sound, like it is shocking how few companies actually really deeply have those three components, because it is really hard to bring all three of those things to bear at the same time, and particularly when you're trying to get something off the ground. Sometimes it's so easy to just focus on the technology. You can worry about people later, you can worry about culture later, or have really cool science, but it's not clear how it's actually going to impact the world, or have a great big vision about how you're going to change the world, but no robust science to back it up. There's just so much variety out there. And every once in a while, you happen on these companies that even from their early stages, and early might be seed, it might be Series C, right? But these emerging companies really have strength in all three. And those are the companies that I'm looking for. And those are the folks and people that are going to get the most out of what I bring to the table, because those are the kind of companies I've always worked for. And my advice, support, mentorship, trusted partnership is really going to be most helpful for people that are building those type of organizations. And it's one of the things I'm so excited about building Lindrow, is getting to work with those folks for hopefully many years to come.
Revigenics is one of the companies that you are an advisor of, and you have been for a number of years now. How long now? Five or so years?
It was, I think maybe even almost 6 years at this point.
Yeah, so that is one that you are able to talk about, right?
Yes,
you can
absolutely.
tell us about what they're doing and kind of what your role in the company's growth has been.
Yeah, so I chair the board of Revigenics, so a little bit different than the advisor roles. Actually have that opportunity to sit on the board, and was really touched when Ryan, who's the founder CEO of Revigenics, reached out. We're former colleagues. I have endless respect for him, his scientific and leadership capabilities, and was really excited when he reached out and asked me to join. And it's been several years now, and watching him build the company into a company that in 2026 is getting ready to go into phase 1. And so for biotech companies, that
it's a big moment.
Transition into an in-human trial is a really big moment. And in a terrible disease, bronchiectasis, which impacts millions of people worldwide, and really seeing the company go from true founder startup idea phase into building something that has the potential to have real value to our industry, and getting to do it from that board seat perspective, which for me was very different. I've always been an operator, being president, chief operating officer. Obviously, I'm in it. I'm an engineer. I'm in it. Group leaders, management roles, and getting that experience of being part of a journey from the board level where it's supportive. There's real fiduciary responsibility, of course, there to the investors, but not being in it on a daily basis. And that's been a really big learning, and in many ways gave me the courage to come out and found Lindrow and start this next phase of my career, focus on advising, helping, supporting companies, as opposed to feeling that need to be in the thick of it in an operator role.
That is, I'm sure, a totally different feeling to just get to have opinions and really help guide and know that what you're offering is helping to really craft the strategy of that company, but not have every responsibility and have to know every piece of the mechanics of how everything comes together. That's someone else's job to figure out how you actually get there, right?
It really is. And I think I'd almost redefine value for myself, for my own ego, and that it is valuable to provide wisdom and support and a very high level, responsibility and governance. And that is a really huge value.
And real responsibility.
Responsibility. But it's in such a different way than, kind of being able to be close to the work on a daily basis. So yeah, it's been a great opportunity. I get to work with great people, and antibiotics is a corner of the healthcare industry that is very underserved and I care a lot about. So it's also been a great mission to be on.
So many great missions in this industry. There's never enough companies that are trying new things and trying to solve these different challenges. There's more than enough to go around. So I'm excited for you in this next phase of mentoring, advising, and supporting some of these next generation companies that are coming along. It's gonna be a fun journey to watch. Absolutely.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's still plenty of diseases to solve, plenty of healthcare challenges to solve. And speaking as somebody who has found myself squarely in middle age, I'm really pulling for all of these companies. Yeah. Not only do I care about this industry and have seen the impact we've been able to have over the preceding decades, but there's so much more to do. And
it's for us. It's for our loved ones, my future children. I don't have any kids, but it really is. It matters for everybody, and it's really amazing. Just the variety of things that people are working on just in Utah alone it's super exciting. And so thanks for being a part of it and for bringing more attention to Utah, more folks out here to see, from a nature standpoint and from a science standpoint, everything that the state has to offer. So thanks for doing your part. So
absolutely. Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Well, this has been great, Tina. Yes. I'm gonna wrap us up, but any closing thoughts or advice for our audience before we part ways for the day?
No, I guess I would say if anybody in your audience is considering a career in our industry, or definitely considering building a company in Utah, there's just no better way to spend your life. As somebody who's been doing this for decades, and it is hard and it can be a struggle, but the rewards of building a career that really impacts people, working with smart, dedicated people that are trying to make a difference, there's just nothing like it. So if you're on the fence, just do it.
Just do it. Just take the risk.
Just do it.
It'll all be worth it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Tina. This has been amazing, and we so appreciate you coming on the HiveCast.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thanks for tuning in to HiveCast by BioHive. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram at BioHive Utah and HiveCast. Thank you for being a part of the Hive. We'll see you next time.